What's up, guys, and welcome to another episode of the Powerhouse Mentality podcast. I am your host. I am Caitlin Kenna-Smith. And on today's episode, I wanted to kind of give you a little bit of background when it came to the Powerhouse Mentality as a whole. So, where did it come from? Why did I start this podcast? I've spoken on this podcast a lot recently, especially about the mission and the vision and the purpose of the Powerhouse Mentality and the podcast and the community that we're developing. But I wanted to give you a little bit of an insight onto how it actually started, because I believe that a lot of people probably listening to this have ideas and they go back and forth on all of these different ideas that are swirling throughout their heads. And unfortunately, a lot of those things just remain ideas. They just continue swirling around in your head and you never take action on it because of the fear that you could potentially fail, or because of the fear of what other people are going to think of you. Or one of the biggest things and one of the biggest fears that I had was losing the safety and the security of maybe a consistent 9 to 5, or kind of just consistency in the routine that you currently have. Because change isn't just related to a career, right? I don't believe that every single person should be an entrepreneur. I don't think that everybody is cut out for it. I think that there are some people in life who are meant to work for companies and help those companies grow to exponential rates, because the reality is that every entrepreneur needs employees, needs entrepreneurs to help them build their mission, because you can't go somewhere alone and build it to a scale that most people who are entrepreneurs and have the vision to build something great want to build it to. You can only get so far by yourself. There's a quote that I've heard many, many times over the last couple of years, one that I really lean on heavily, especially when it comes to this topic, is that if you want to go fast, you go by yourself. But if you want to go far, you go together, or you go with a community, you go with a team. I can't remember the exact way that it's put out, but you get the idea. When you have people doing it with you, and you have people who really truly bleed the mission and understand the purpose, then that's an incredible thing. You know, I was listening to one of my favorite podcasts, the Nick Bare podcast, and he was talking about his definition of brand. And he has a brand called BPN. It's a nutrition and supplement company. And he's been building BPN over the last 12 years through his YouTube, through his social media. And the biggest reason that he's found so much success is because the brand goes much deeper than just a nutrition and supplement brand. It's, how he described it, a heartbeat. It's an emotion. It's a mission. It's something that people can really just lean into and grow with. And that's exactly the idea that I have behind the Powerhouse Mentality and how it really came about. So, for a really long time in my life, I was alone. I was the definition of loner. And to this day, I'm introverted. Like, a lot of you who are listening to this right now, or who know me, may be like, there's no way you're introverted. But yes, I am introverted. I prefer to keep to myself. I can be very shy. In fact, when I was in middle school, elementary school, high school, I was constantly bullied because I was the weird girl, because I was so shy and I was just awkward. And there's nothing wrong with that. But what I learned now is that developing communication skills, developing sales skills, developing leadership skills, is that you get to be whoever you want to be in life. So if I didn't want to be the awkward, shy person, then I didn't need to be, right? I became that person because I constantly told myself that, oh, I'm shy, oh, I'm awkward, so I just would act that way when I was put in social situations. And again, to this day, like, I go into a social situation and it's really hard for me to come out of my shell and take initiative and start conversations, but I know that it's worth it. And once I get out of that little shell or out of my comfort zone a little bit, I'm going to feel much better. And I think that a lot of people can relate to that, where you're almost like an extroverted introvert or an introverted extrovert, where you're super quiet, super shy, a little bit awkward, and then as soon as you really get out of your shell, you get to know someone, you have a connection, or you're put in a situation where you feel like an expert or you're super comfortable, then you really get out of your shell and you become this extremely social person. And that's kind of what I am. So for a really long time, though, I was so focused on first my eating disorder, which literally wrapped up my entire life. I wasn't able to focus on anything else but that disorder because that disorder was me. It was. And I hate saying that, but it's the reality that I have to come to terms with, is that for almost 6-7 years of my life, I wasn't Caitlin. I was this eating disorder. And that might sound dramatic to some people, but if you've ever dealt with somebody or lived with somebody who's had an eating disorder or an addiction, or if you've struggled with any sort of addiction yourself, I'm sure you can relate to this. You're not yourself when you let the addiction take control over everything. And when I'm saying everything, I'm saying fucking everything. A lot of people might associate an eating disorder with, oh, you just work out a lot, or you binge on exercising, or you move a lot and you have that obsession with yourself in the mirror, or an obsession with the scale, or you just are hyper fixated on food and you starve yourself, or you binge and you purge, or whatever. But that's not the truth. That is a side effect on what the actual cause is. A lot of times when I talk about fat loss, I talk about how obesity is the smoke, but being under-muscled is the flame. And you can relate that to an eating disorder where the eating disorder is the smoke, but insecurities, lack of self-belief, trauma, that's the flame. So if we just throw water on the smoke, nothing's going to happen. But if we throw water on the flames, then we can make a dent. When you have an eating disorder or any sort of addiction, that's kind of what it's like. Everything gets hit by this thing. I don't talk about it enough, but I want to talk about it more. And the reason why I want to talk about it more is because I want people to learn from my experiences and learn from my mistakes. And I hate calling it a mistake because at this point, I've come to terms with what I've done to my body. And as much regret as I have for doing it, I would never go back and change it. And to some of you, that might sound crazy. But that experience that I went through made me the person that I am today. I would not be the person that I am today without going through that horrific experience and experiencing that type of addiction and that level of addiction where I nearly killed myself. It helps me better relate to my clients. It helps me better relate to people who are struggling. And it helps me help other people not do the same thing. There's a quote that I love, and I talk about quotes all the time because I really love quotes. There's some quotes that like hit you and you just vibe with them and it just brings so much powerful perspective to your life. But there's a quote that Ed Milet has, and he says it so often. And it's, you are most qualified to help the person that you used to be. And that's how I look at this. That's how I look at the Powerhouse Mentality. Is I'm most qualified to help the person that I used to be. So when I had this eating disorder, I was addicted to it. I was obsessed with it. And I was very alone because of it. The only person who remained with me during that time was my mother. And my brother stopped talking to me. He lived with my cousins instead of with me and my mom because of how bad of a situation it was. My grandma was even getting a little bit defensive with me because of how selfish I was being and how much I was hurting my mom and taking her life experience away. My cousins, who I was super close with, like growing up, we were like best friends. We would do everything together. I still don't really have a good relationship with them to this day. And I didn't have any friends. You know, I was in college when my eating disorder got really bad. I went to a commuter college in Brooklyn, New York. So I would just commute to class, get shit done, and come home. I wouldn't even try to get outside of my comfort zone to talk to other people because I was just so fixated on this eating disorder. It consumed everything. It consumed all of my thoughts. There were days, more days than I'd like to admit, where I would have a 10 a.m. class or a 9 a.m. class. I would get to the gym at 5 a.m. when they opened, and my gym was about a 45-minute train ride from school, and I would miss my first class because I was still on the fucking Stairmaster, or I was still on the treadmill, or I was still doing dumbass intervals. And it's crazy to think back and realize that I let myself get that bad. And right now, it's kind of becoming more prominent in my head because I'm going through this hormone journey. And I'll keep you guys updated. I'm going to do a separate episode on the hormone journey that I'm going through. But I just recently started working with a company called Joy Wellness. And honestly, I've been working with them for about 2 weeks now. I just got my blood work done and got the results back. And I'll have my consult with my wellness specialist on Monday. And once I do that, I'll kind of put all of my thoughts together, put together a game plan, and talk about it on the podcast. But so far, the experience has been phenomenal. So if you're a female who's looking to optimize her hormones or really just know what's going on under the hood and get a professional's opinion on what your blood work looks like, Joy Wellness and their brother company, Blokes, which is the men's side of things, they focus on optimizing, not being reactive. So if you have, for example, your thyroid hormones aren't optimal, but they're not technically clinically bad yet, they are going to help you optimize them so that they don't get to the place where then you have to be on medication, which I think is an incredible thing. I'm going to put down below the link to check out Joy as well as Blokes if you're a man. Because honestly, I've worked with a couple other companies and I've never experienced customer service as good as this. And the results that they sent me were so easy to read and so broken down just so well so that you could fully understand what's going on. But with that being said, the hormone thing is reminding me of the damage that I did to my body. Because I've always struggled with my hormones since I've had an eating disorder, because when you get that lean and you have that little body fat on you for such a long period of time and you're putting your body through so much restriction and stress, it's really hard for your body to actually care about you thriving. It just cares about you surviving. And I was barely doing that. So with my eating disorder, not only did it consume all of my thoughts, but it actually started to break my body down to the point where I am technically 5 years, 6 years recovered, and I'm still dealing with the repercussions with my digestive system, with my stress levels, with my sleep, with my ability to recover, build muscle, build strength, and it sucks. But again, it's one of those things where I'm taking personal responsibility, and now, more than ever, I'm taking personal responsibility to fix the problem through optimizing my hormone health. And this all goes towards the Powerhouse Mentality. It's all coming together. Don't worry. But the eating disorder was one area where I really fixated everything. And then once I started to recover from my eating disorder, I fell into some really bad depression. And I fell into some really bad depression because I didn't have anything to focus on. Because I had this eating disorder that that took all of my attention. It was kind of like I had tunnel vision. And then I no longer had this thing, and I wasn't happy with the person that I was. I just felt miserable. I felt like I was gaining so much weight. I hated who I was. I wasn't satisfied in my career. I was just a personal trainer working at Crunch Fitness in Brooklyn, and I was living with a roommate in an apartment in Brooklyn at the time, and I was struggling really bad financially because I was a personal trainer. So I wasn't making that much money, because when you're a personal trainer working at a gym, it's really difficult to make a lot of money unless you're working literally all of the time. And I was in college at the time as well. Once I graduated, I did a bodybuilding competition, which was probably the absolute worst thing for me to do because of how much I hated myself and my body. The bodybuilding competition was almost an excuse for me to continue my eating disorder tendencies, but have it be okay, right? Because if somebody said, oh, wow, you're losing a lot of weight, or wow, you're taking your food scale out to eat with you, or oh, wow, you always have meal prep and you're eating so clean, what I would say to them is like, oh yeah, I have a bodybuilding competition that I'm prepping for, and it would be okay. So I was in it for the complete wrong reason. I think bodybuilding shows, bikini shows, physique shows can be an incredible thing for somebody to do. And it taught me so much about discipline and grit and fortitude. But the reality is I wasn't in it for the right reasons. So it wasn't the right thing for me. I was doing it for almost like, just like, I wanted to look like the people who were on stage, but I didn't even have the muscle mass to be able to do that. And I was almost blinded to that. So my critique from this bodybuilding show was she is way too small. And in fact, when I got on stage, my mom said to me that she couldn't believe how tiny I looked compared to everybody else. I was like 95 pounds on stage, which is insane because I'm 5'6". But after I finished my bodybuilding show, that's when the depression and the anxiety got really bad. Because during my bodybuilding prep, I graduated from college and I was promoted to assistant fitness manager at the gym I was working for. And I wanted that promotion so bad. It was so exciting for me. But then about a month and a half, 2 months later, I was demoted back down to a personal trainer. And the reason why was because I was so fixated on this prep and I was so fixated on getting back into my eating disorder ways that I started to lose focus on my career. And I let things slip. And it reflected in my performance and the performance of the club. And that led to me being demoted. Once that happened, I was in a really bad place mentally. And about a year prior, I had gotten out of a relationship that I was in for about a year. 2 years, actually. And it was my first, really serious relationship. And it was a person that I truly believed that I would one day marry. But it ended up getting so toxic that, it couldn't work anymore. It was bad. And I started to realize that, hey, this isn't for me. So he ended up moving to North Carolina to become a firefighter. And when I got done with my bikini show, I had nothing in New York. And so I went crawling back to him. And I hate saying that, but I did. And I moved down to North Carolina with about a week's notice. Packed up everything, went to North Carolina, moved in with this guy. We were together for another year, probably. And things got so bad. I ended up kicking him out of the apartment. And I remember that day so distinctly because I was in such a bad place, and we were basically broken up and just living together at that point. And the things he would say to me, just verbal abuse at that point, it was just terrible. And I remember calling my mom and saying, I can't do this. I want to die. I wanted to die because I couldn't escape it. I would go to work and I was really, really focused on my career. And I was doing really well with my career. I was building from being an assistant fitness manager to being a fitness manager to being a sales manager and doing really well at a different gym down in North Carolina. And I was really happy with that. But I was miserable everywhere else. The job was stressful. I came home and I was stressed there because I felt like I couldn't do anything, right? I was in the bedroom. He was sleeping on the couch. It was fucking terrible. And I called my mom and I said, I can't do this anymore. And she said, I will pay half of your rent until you can do it by yourself. And to this day, I have to thank my mom for doing that because that got me out of a really bad situation. And I fucking kicked him out. Said, I'm sorry, you have to find an apartment. I didn't even say I'm sorry because the damage that he did to me physically and mentally, there's no reason I should be saying sorry. But that moment made me realize that, hey, I can do hard things. I can take control of my life and I can be a strong person. And I realized in that time that, hey, this career at Fitness Connection, this is a cool thing. And I want to continue to grow it. And I really, really worked very hard to become a general manager at the gym because that was the only thing that I wanted to do. And I almost killed myself doing it, literally. But again, it's something in my life that I would never regret because working at Fitness Connection, although it was literally the most toxic work environment that I could ever imagine. And if you've worked in sales, in gym membership, then you understand what I'm talking about. The hours are unbelievably unethical and the pay is unbelievably unethical. and the stress and the numbers and the goals that they set for you are stupid. But again, like if you work in gym memberships, I think that you can really make it in any area of sales because you become a really good salesperson so long as you stick to your own integrity and morals, because it's really easy. And I saw a lot of people who would just do anything to get a sale, and it didn't matter kind of how much they veered from their integrity and morals, but that's not for me, and it never was for me. So I just became really good, and I became the top salesperson in the country, in the company, and eventually was finally promoted to general manager. And that story on how I got promoted to general manager and how long it took, that's a story all in itself, let's say. So at first they promoted me to, we'll call it a mini general manager, where I was running the worst club in the district, the smallest club, the most rundown club, the club that was called the jailhouse, basically. So I was put there, and I was told, okay, you're going to be a general manager at this club, but your pay's going to remain the same, and your hours are going to be longer, and you're going to have more responsibilities. But you're going to be a general manager. Man, they sold that shit to me real hard because I was super excited, and then about 3 months in, I realized, oh, fuck. Okay, but then I started to bring that club up, and I started to say, you know what, I'm not going to focus on the environment that I'm in. I'm going to focus on making the best team possible to make this place amazing. And I did. I did the best that I could with what I was given. I couldn't obviously do repairs on the gym. I could make it as clean as possible with our staff, and I can make it the best experience for our people. And that's exactly what I did. And I brought that club up. I remember at one point we were in the top 5 in the country, and that's huge for that club. Out of I think there were 50 clubs at the time. And then eventually I was actually promoted to general manager, and I was moved to another club, one of our bigger clubs. And I was super excited for the opportunity, and I knew that I would thrive. But guess what? I didn't. I didn't thrive. It sucked. I was put into a club that had no sales manager, which means I was basically being a sales manager and being a general manager. And it was January, so we were having a wonderful time. But I knew that it would be okay, because I knew that I had the skills, and I knew that I had the team, and I knew that I could do this. And then March 2020 happened. Or was it April? Fuck. The government shutdown happened, March 16th, 2020, I believe. I remember the gym was really, really empty, and it was around lunchtime, usually around lunchtime in the gym that I was in. It wasn't empty. It was usually pretty poppin' because people were coming on their lunch break. And I remember just looking at the TVs and seeing them saying, Disney World's closing, the NBA's shutting down. And I was like, oh shit, this stuff is actually happening. This is bad. The world's shutting down. I remember texting my brother and being like, hey, the world is actually shutting down. And he was like, yeah, the stock market is a shit show right now. He's a big finance guy. And I was like, I wonder if they're going to close my gym. And then sure as shit, about an hour after that experience, I get a text that there's going to be a conference call and that everybody needs to be on it. And that's when they said that we were going to shut down the gym starting immediately for 2 weeks. And then we'll reopen. Well, we didn't reopen in 2 weeks. In fact, we didn't even reopen in 2 months. We reopened in 6 months. And when the gym initially closed, they said they would continue to pay us for the 2 weeks. And then after the 2 weeks went by and we realized that we weren't going to be reopening the gym, they got us on another conference call. And they furloughed everybody. And I had no idea what that meant. So I Googled it, and I realized that I was technically not fired, but I was not going to be paid. Which is not very helpful when you're trying to, survive, pay rent. So I went on a run because that was the only logical thing that I could do in that moment was I need to run my emotions away. That running has always been that thing that when I'm super emotional, I almost just go on a run because it helps me. It gives me so much mental clarity. And that's what training and running does for me. It gives me so much mental clarity. But I went on this run and I came back And with being out of work, I was actually starting to look at social media and be like, I've always wanted to build my own business and be my own boss and be my own trainer. Like, the only thing that had held me back ever from becoming an online coach and trainer was that I didn't believe in myself. I mean, I did it in person for so long, and I managed people for so long, and I had such a passion for health and fitness, and I was very committed myself. I was like, I have so much free time. Why not do this? Why not go all in on myself and see if I can really change my life and be the person that I've always wanted to be, with fear and doubt aside? Now, at the time, there was a lot of fear and there was a lot of doubt. I will not lie to you. It wasn't like, I can do this. It was more like, well, you know what? I'm going to fucking try, because I have nothing to lose at this point. A month prior to the government shutdown, I had tried to kill myself. I had tried to drive into a pole. I missed the pole. And when I drove away from that situation, I realized, first of all, I had immediate regret. I said, well, I'm not doing that again. But then I realized that, I survived that for a reason. I'm here for a purpose. And I need to figure that shit out. And then I put it off because I procrastinated a lot. And when the government shutdown happened, I realized this is all happening for a reason. And at the time, I was a huge listener of Andy Frisella's podcast, which was the MF CEO Project at the time. Now it's Real AF. But the MF CEO Project, in one episode with the whole government shutdown that he was talking about, that's kind of when it started to transition to Real AF, he spoke about how there's going to be two groups of people. One group is going to take this opportunity to sit on their ass and not get anything done. They're going to eat shit, look like shit, feel like shit, watch video games, do all that crap. The other group of people are going to take advantage of the free time that they have and build something great and build an incredible life and become the best version of themselves. And I said, you know what? I want to be that person. So I started 75 Hard. And that was my first time doing 75 Hard. And it was before 75 Hard even had an app. So I'm an OG 75 Harder. And I said, you know what? If in 75 days I'm still miserable and I still hate myself and I still feel like I have no purpose and passion in my life, then I'm going to try again. I'm going to try to kill myself again. Because at that point, I was just in such a dark place. And I hate saying it, but it's part of my story. And I want to share it with you because I want you to see that no matter how dark things seem, no matter how at rock bottom you feel, you can come back from it. You can bounce back and you can become such an incredible person. But nothing changes unless you take that first step. And the first step is always the hardest step, but I promise you that it's worth it. The only way that you can truly fail is if you quit on yourself. You're going to fail, you're going to stumble, you're going to fall over many times during the journey, but unless you truly quit and say, I'm done, you throw your hands up, that's when you actually fail. That is true weakness. You're not weak if you show emotion. You're not weak if you cry. You're not weak if you fall down. You're weak if you quit. You're weak when you give up on yourself. That's when you're weak. In all other scenarios, you're strong as fuck, and you need to lean into that. And that's what I wish somebody would say to me in those moments when I felt so fucking broken. I don't want people to cry about it and say, it's okay, you're gonna be fine. I want people to push me and tell me that, hey, it's going to be okay, but you have to move. When a boxer gets knocked down in a fight, they have 10 seconds to get back up before they are quote-unquote knocked out, and they lose the fight. You have 10 seconds to reevaluate and to figure your shit out, but you have 10 seconds, not 20 seconds. Get up, brush yourself off, keep moving, because the failure, the pain, the discomfort, that teaches you the most. It's not easy to bounce back from these things that traumatize us. And it does take time. But I want you to understand that just because you went through something hard, and just because you have trouble getting out of bed in the morning, and just because you feel this pain that nobody else can experience but you, that doesn't make you weak. That makes you strong because you're still fucking moving despite all of that. The second you quit, that's when you're weak. So just make the choice to never quit. Even if you're crawling through mud, keep moving. And 75 Hard taught me that, like, you can do hard things. You don't always have to be the girl who isn't good enough. So, like I said, I started 75 Hard, and that would be my last chance that I was giving myself at life. It was the last little bit of hope that I had, because at that point, like I said, I was in a really dark place, and I felt like I had tried everything. And I was just desperate for change. And when I listened to that episode of the podcast, Andy's podcast, I realized that nobody was coming to save me. I had to take action to save myself and get myself out of this situation. And I've learned that before in my life. When I had my eating disorder, that was one of the biggest things that stands out to me as a lesson that I've learned. Nobody is coming to save you. And for a really long time, I was always waiting for somebody to come and save me, instead of me taking personal responsibility to heal and move on from the things that hurt me and the trauma that hurt me, and to be able to move on to be a better version of myself and overcome what had happened in the past, because I cannot change the past. But right now I have a pen and a piece of paper, and I can write out what my story looks like moving forward. And while I was on this journey doing 75 Hard, I started to really believe in myself. And I think that is one of the most valuable things about doing hard, difficult things, about keeping the commitments that you make to yourself, no matter what's going on in your life, and building discipline. I always say that pain, suffering, adversity, it's our biggest teacher. And it's so valuable to be able to do difficult things on a daily basis and seek discomfort intentionally, because it teaches you that you are capable of so much more than you think, and your body can handle so much more than you could think. There were so many times when I was doing 75 Hard when I thought to myself, wow, past Caitlin would have quit. Past Caitlin would have found an excuse to not do this workout, to not read my 10 pages. And that's also when I fell in love with reading. Like, when I was in high school, I was the kid who would always fucking Smart Notes every single book that we read. The only book that I actually read that we were assigned was Night by, what the hell? I don't remember his name. Night. It was about Nazi concentration camps, and I found that fascinating. But everything else, I just Smart Noted it and barely passed the exam sometimes. But sometimes, we aced them because sometimes the Smart Notes were really helpful. But I really fell in love with reading when I started 75 Hard, and I started to learn so much more. And what I find even to this day is, like, when I'm actively reading 10 pages a day of a personal development book, I have more ideas. I'm more creative with my content, and I put out more valuable things for you guys. And I'm better for my clients. I just show up better. And I love that, because I love being creative. I love creating content. I love creating podcasts and different things for you guys. It's a passion of mine. And when I'm reading, I just feel like I'm more dialed in and I have more ideas and I don't feel as stuck on what to talk about. And it just helps me expand my knowledge and expand my experience. So 75 Hard not only taught me that I can do hard things, it got me out of my comfort zone in so many different ways. And it allowed me to truly believe in myself. And that's really when I started getting into social media, and I really started to post content and share my journey and share my story. Because I realized that if I wanted to make an impact on the world, and I really wanted to, then I had to be able to share my story on social media. I had to be able to put out valuable content for people on social media. I had to be able to connect with people on social media. And during this time where people weren't leaving their homes, it was even more important for me to be able to connect with people on social media, not just for my own sanity, but to also help other people realize that you have a choice here during this time. Is you can sit on your ass and do nothing and become nothing, or you can go all in on yourself and become the best version of yourself. So when I started to realize what 75 Hard was doing for me and what doing difficult things was doing for me and the value that it was giving me, I wanted to show other people that they could do the same thing. And I wanted to teach other people what I've learned throughout my entire fitness journey and what I've learned throughout my entire journey with facing addiction, with facing trauma, with facing abusive relationships, and be able to show people that there is so much more that's possible than what they're giving themselves credit for. There was a point in time in my life where I was always throwing myself a pity party. I was always waiting for somebody to come and save me. And I was never taking action or responsibility for things that were happening in my life. I would always be the girl who would say, I hate this, boo me, boo hoo, I wish this, I wish that, instead of saying, okay, I want something, I'm going to go and get it. Because I was too busy feeling sorry for myself because of all the shit that had happened to me. But what I know now, what I've learned over the last 5 years, is that stuff happens to us. Like, life happens. Everybody has a story. Everybody has trauma. Everybody has something that's happened to them in their life. But you get to decide if your past is going to become your prison or if it's going to become your power and push you forward. So I did 75 Hard, I completed that, and then I was like, you know what, I'm going to do the entire Live Hard program, which composes of 75 Hard, Phase 1, Phase 2, and Phase 3. Phase 1 is a 30-day program that has a bunch of other tasks added onto it in addition to the 75 Hard tasks, which to this day is my favorite phase. If I ever want to just do something very challenging and almost reset myself, instead of just doing 75 Hard, I feel like Phase 1 is so valuable. It includes a 5-minute cold shower, additional powerless tasks, and 10 minutes of visualization, which is so powerful. Then Phase 2, it's just 30 days of 75 Hard that you complete 30 days after Phase 1. So you have to take a 30-day break, and then you can do Phase 2. And then Phase 3, you have to start it 30 days to the year that you finished 75 Hard, or that you started 75 Hard. So that way it's an entire year, and it's the Live Hard program. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to do this fucking program. I'm going to do the entire thing because 75 Hard made me addicted to becoming better. And it made me addicted to becoming somebody, like a fucking weapon is the best way for me to explain it. And I never felt happier. And that was the most important thing, is that I didn't realize that I could feel happiness. And when I started to feel fulfillment, and when I started to help people through my coaching, when I started to see people get results, when I started to, get people reaching out to me saying, hey, I fucking love your content. I love your stories. I love everything that you're putting out. It's really helping me. It started to show me that, I can make an impact on the world and I can do this. And I fucking loved it. So, halfway through Phase 1, I moved out of the apartment that I was in with my roommate, Megan, and I moved into my own apartment. And this was one of the coolest things for me because I know this sounds silly, but this apartment complex that I moved into, it was the apartment complex that I wanted to live in the entire time I was in North Carolina. I remember seeing it go up, seeing it get built, and looking at the apartments on the website and being like, I want to live here, but I need to do a hell of a lot of work to be able to afford this. And I did. And the gyms were about to reopen, and I was going to become, the general manager again, so I knew that I was going to be okay. And I took a shot, moved into my own apartment, and the gym still didn't open for another 3 months. I was struggling, but I was making it work. And at the end of Phase 1, on day 28, 27, I got a DM from this random fucking dude. This random dude who commented on one of my stories where I showed that it was pouring rain in North Carolina. And it was on the 4th of July. And he messaged me and he said, "Is it raining where you're at in North Carolina?" And my first instinct was like, yeah, of course. That's why it's raining in the video, right? But I was like, yeah, I'm in Raleigh, or I'm in Cary around Raleigh. And he's like, oh, well, I'm in Fayetteville and we're actually playing some volleyball outside. So I was just making sure that it wasn't like about to start downpouring on us. And I was like, haha, yeah. And we started kind of having this conversation. Turns out this guy is going through selection, or he passed selection as a Green Beret, and he's going through the Q course, and he's about to go to SEER school, which is like prisoner of war kind of training. And he loved Chewies, and there was a Chewies near me, and we were just having such great conversation that I was like, that he was like, I would love to come out to Chewies and have my last meal. And I was like, you know what? Let's go to Chewies. Dude pulls up in a blue Raptor, opens the door for me, and now I'm married to him. Guys, open up the door for your ladies, because that was my first instinct of him. And I remember actually getting home that night and calling my mom and saying, "Mom, I'm gonna marry this guy. This is the guy." And my mom has totally heard that from me before, but I really felt it this time. I was like, this is the guy. Like, we literally went back to my apartment after we went to Chewy's, which destroyed my stomach. Oh my goodness. But we went back to my apartment and we just talked for like 3 or 4 hours. Like, I've never just spoken to somebody about like everything. And I was hooked, and so was he. And slowly, eventually, over a period of time, he went to Sage, because SEER was canceled due to COVID. So he went to Sage, which is another part of the Q course. And he was gone for, I think it was like 6 or 8 weeks. And I was like, this is going to be the test, right? Like, if he comes back and he's like, I missed you, this and this, like, oh, we're still good. Like, we're still good. Good mythical morning. Then this is probably, it was like the test, And I remember I was at the gym. We had just recently reopened, and I got a text from him that said, "I am so happy that I get to come back to you." And I was so fucking happy. And then slowly over time, he just kind of moved in, and it just kind of happened that way. And, this isn't a story about me and Stone. I'm going to have Stone on the podcast when he comes back from Honduras, and we're going to talk a little bit about a bunch of shit, because I'm finally going to get him to speak on my podcast. But the point of all of this is to say that I went back to the gym after the government shutdown ended. At the time, Stone was now basically living with me. And I was miserable at this job because I was no longer a general manager. They only kept like 2 general managers, and then they made everybody else an assistant general manager. So I was an assistant general manager in a different club. And I was so unhappy because I knew what I had the potential of doing, and that I wanted to be my own boss, create my own company, be my own coach people, and build a business and make a bigger impact. I knew that this thing, moving up in the fitness connection, like in the gym industry, it just wasn't for me anymore. It wasn't what I wanted anymore. And there was one day where I made a connection with somebody who I used to work with, and they were like, you know what? They didn't work at Fitness Connection anymore. They said that they were in roofing sales, and they said that it's phenomenal, it's flexible, you're going to be able to work on your business while you do roofing sales, and you're a great salesperson, so you'll do really well here. And I was like, you know what? Bet, I'll do this, right? So I left Fitness Connection. One of the hardest decisions of my life was stepping away from that place, because I spent so much time working to become a general manager, and then eventually a district manager. I wanted to move up in the company. That was what I wanted. And I made the decision that like I didn't want that anymore, and I needed to pursue something that was terrifying and build my own business, build my own coaching business, become my own boss, and build the life that I wanted for myself and for Stone at that time, because it wasn't just me anymore. It was us. So I went into roofing sales for, I think, a month. And if you've ever done roofing sales, or if you've ever had a roof salesman come to your door, it's awful. I was literally knocking door to door. That was how I was getting business, and I got zero business. If you've ever met me in person, I am a small white girl, and I am white as fuck. And if I knocked on your door and said, hey, would you like a roof inspection? It didn't even matter how I swung it. It was not happening. I don't really look like a roofer or like I know anything about roofing. And guess what? I fucking didn't. I was trying to learn, but again, not really something I was passionate about. So I realized that, okay, maybe this isn't for me. And then I was offered another opportunity from somebody else who was opening his own boutique-style gym where it was kind of like group training. And he sold me on the idea that it would be like my gym, that I'd be able to program all the workouts and I would be the person. Like, it would be mine. He would just be like the investor. So I went there for one day and realized that I was walking into a burning building. All the employees hated the guy. The guy had no idea what he was doing when it came to fitness. He didn't have a passion for fitness. He just had a passion for making money. And come to find out that he kind of wasn't going to keep the promises that he told me when it came to, you know, like building the business and giving it all to me and stuff like that. So, you know what? I was there for one day, and I remember I was doing 75 hard at the time. I was just doing another round to kind of clean things back up. And at the time, I was actually also weaning off of my depression medication or my anxiety medication. So I had made the choice that, like, hey, I've been on this for 6 years. I don't need this shit anymore. So I started to wean off of it. And if you've ever weaned off of anxiety medication, it is a really hard thing to do. I was getting brain shocks. I was having like emotional outbursts. I was not okay. I did get off of it, and I haven't touched the stuff since. And I've never been happier when it came to that kind of stuff. Like, I never wanted to rely on something like that. And I was doing 75 hard in order to keep me on track while I was doing that. And I brought my weighted vest to the gym, to that work environment, so that I could throw it on after my shift or, you know, whenever I got out of there and just do a 45-minute ruck around. So I got out of there. I remember the sun was setting, and I immediately started crying when I got out of there because I was like, shit, this isn't working out the way that I wanted to. What am I going to do? And I was building coaching. I was starting to really become more involved in the First Form program because First Form really was one of the things that drove me to be able to help more people. And I'm still committed to that company to this day and will become a bigger part of First Form. Will. Absolutely. My goal is to become an athlete for First Form because I've never aligned with a mission more. And I love the people. I love the company. I love the supplements. And they gave me the opportunity to be able to help more people and to be a coach and online. I was already a trainer and a coach, but I called Stone while I was on this walk, and I told him everything that happened, and I was breaking down, and I remember this so distinctly. He said, babe, quit. We'll figure it out. I believe in you, and I know that you can build something. I've never had anybody tell me that. Like, never have I ever had anybody, especially somebody that I was dating, tell me that, like, I believe in you. We are going to figure this out. Like, go all in on this. And it makes me emotional because to this day, he's my biggest supporter. And he just left on Tuesday to go to Honduras for 5 weeks. And it's been really hard because he's my peace. You know, he brings me comfort. And again, he's my biggest supporter. And it's incredible to have somebody who supports you like that. And so we did. We figured it out. And I went all in on coaching. And I've never looked back since. Has it been the hardest thing that I've ever done because of all of the financial things that have come up in that time? Yeah, absolutely. Like, there was a time where I had like negative $1,000 in my bank account. And it's just part of the journey. There were so many times where I thought to myself, this isn't going to work. I'm going to have to find a job. I'm going to apply to Starbucks or whatever. But I just kept believing in myself, and I kept working, and I never quit. And one day I was offered a job to be a coach at a company that I believed in so heavily, Hidden Summit. And I worked there for 2.5 years to give me the confidence to be able to say, you know what? It's time. It's time for me to build the Powerhouse Mentality. The Powerhouse Mentality started as an idea. Me and Stone were on a walk, and I was like, I really want to do a podcast. I really want to start a podcast because I love being able to create content on Instagram and to be able to like talk more and give more value. And I really want to do a podcast because I loved listening to podcasts, and I had received so much value from Ed Milet's podcast, Annie Frisella's podcast, everybody's podcast that I was listening to. I was getting so much value, and I wanted to be able to give that to other people and to be able to build my mission and vision and purpose through a podcast. And so we were on this walk, and he was like, just do it. Like, start a podcast. Like, I already had a mic. I could figure it out. I knew Audacity, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to start this podcast. And it took me about a year to actually start the podcast, but I did. And I recorded my first episode. It was absolutely terrible. But we were on this walk, and we were just like throwing around ideas. And he was like, what about the Powerhouse Mentality? And I was like, kind of like that. So I went with it. And that's exactly how the Powerhouse Mentality became a podcast. And then, I don't know, maybe 6 months ago at this point. Not even 6 months ago. Yeah, maybe. Okay. I'm bad with my timing. But yeah, about 6 months ago, I was still working for Hidden Summit. And I was to the point where I was going back and forth in my head. Like, do I want to stay here? Do I want to go and do my own coaching company? What do I want to do? Because I felt like I needed to branch off and do my own thing. And I felt like it was my obligation to my own mission to be able to do that, because I wasn't living my full potential, and I knew that, and I didn't like that. So I was in a really bad place mentally for a while, just going back and forth with this. And again, one of those conversations that we just had, I remember I was sitting on the floor in the bathroom because I was just like emotional, right? That's like where you go when you're emotional. You just go and sit in the floor in the bathroom, right? And Stone was there with me, and he was talking to me. We were having a really good, like, deep heart-to-heart conversation. And he was like, it's not worth it. Leave. You can do this by yourself. You have learned so much through Hidden Summit, and you have the confidence to be able to do this on your own. But then we started talking about, like, well, he has so many ideas. He is one of the most creative people that I know, and he needs to like lean into it a little bit more. I'm trying. But he was like, I have this idea that I want to like, he really vibes with competition. And he was like, I want to find a way where we can like bring people together in like a community or a gym or something where we can build competition, or we can create competition and we can build community through it. And I was like, I like this. I like where your head's at. And he's like, because I feel like in the fitness industry and on social media and in the world, everybody's divided. But we all have the same mission at heart. We're just trying to become a healthier, more fit, better version of ourselves physically and emotionally. But everybody's like drawn apart. Like, we have CrossFit, and then we have powerlifting, and we have bodybuilding and runners, and everybody talks shit at each other. Like, the bodybuilders are all making fun of the CrossFitters for doing pull-ups, and the CrossFitters are making fun of bodybuilders because they're on stage in their Speedos. And nobody's actually just coming together and creating something different and like knocking down those walls. And that's what he was saying he wanted to do. And he was like, I want to make this into like a gym. Like, I want to have this huge gym where we have a section for bodybuilding, and then we have a section for CrossFit, and we have a section for powerlifting, and we have a section for beginners, and we have like a commons area where everybody can come together and learn from each other, because people who do bodybuilding have a lot to learn from CrossFitters that can be valuable for their sport and vice versa. And I was like, wow, I really love this idea, but we can't build a gym right now. We just can't. We don't have the financial means to do so. But I love where your head's at. And he was like, what if we made a community? And we built it from the Powerhouse Mentality. Like, we started making clothing to help bring people together and share the brand and share the mission. And we made it the best fucking clothing we could because we want it to be the best quality stuff. And then what if we really focused on the podcast and built that up even more? And we built this community where people could compete. And we did like this little like quarterly competition to bring people together even more and give them more value. And it started to just become this thing, and we were like fucking vibing with it. And this was all done on the bathroom floor. It was great. And now 6 months later, we're here and we're in it. And, you know, we launched the Powerhouse Mentality community, which is like a branch off of the podcast, in April. And we got so much overwhelming support at first, and it's just beginning. So if you're a part of the Powerhouse Mentality community on Facebook, if you've ever ordered any clothing from the brand, if you've ever shared a podcast episode, or, I mean, you're listening to one right now, and if you made it this far, I appreciate and love you. I thank you so much, because we wouldn't be where we are today without you guys. And all of this hour-long podcast just to say, the Powerhouse Mentality is going to take over the world. It is going to be a brand that is recognized by so many people. And I want you guys to have a connection to the brand and to feel the emotion and the heartbeat of the Powerhouse Mentality. Because while we make clothing, while we have a podcast, while we have a competition, and while we will one day have a gym, it's so much deeper than that. The mission of the Powerhouse Mentality is to build community through competition by knocking down the walls that have been put up in the fitness industry to bring people together and help you become the best version of yourself. So, if you've ever found value from the podcast, please share it. If you found value from this episode of the podcast, please share it. Tag me. I want to know who's listening, because I love you guys more than anything and I appreciate you. But go out today and do one thing that's going to take you one step closer to where you want to be.